creative writing skills, it carries the most marks of any question on the Leaving Cert, right? The Leaving Cert English. So composing is, therefore, if we're just basing it on marks, which is kind of the way we base exams, then composing is the most important question because it's worth 25%. No other question comes near to it, really, in terms of the marks. If you think about comprehending question A, it's 50 marks, 12.5%. If you take any question on paper 2, poetry, we looked at this week, it's worth 70 marks, which is 30 marks less than this question. This question is worth 100 marks. That's 25% of our overall grade in English. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to spell it out loud and clear. Composing is the most important question on the paper, and it's really therefore very significant, and for you to have practiced and looked at this question a good bit and practice writing this question and going through samples and writing your own creative writing. Let's think about creative writing. I'm aware that, you know, creative writing isn't necessarily something that everybody loves. Some people do love it, absolutely, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people, by the time it gets to their Leaving Cert exam in the summer, have never really done more than one essay or two at the most. And I think in order that we get a good mark in this question, we have to practice it at the very least. You don't need to love it, okay? You don't need to love it. You just need to practice and become good at it, because every higher level student can become good at creative writing if they practice it. Again, you don't have to love it, you just have to practice the skills and become good at it. And, you know, apart from what I'm going to say today in today's class, one key way that we become good at creative writing is just by doing it, by writing, by forcing ourselves to write a little bit creatively, whether it's short stories or speeches or articles or discursive essays or personal essays. We force ourselves to try a bit of creative writing, and the more we do, same with speaking and so on, reading, the better we become at it. If we don't practice creative writing, we don't become any better on it. One of the attitudes towards this question is, sure, do you know what? I'll just go into the exam and I'll do a question on the day and I'll be grand. And yeah, that's exactly what you will be. Grand. It will be fine. It will be okay. You know, you'll pass, but you won't get a good mark. Right? And in order to get a good mark in creative writing, you need to practice it. You need to take it on yourself. I realise teachers get bogged down in paper 2. I do myself, and have to force myself as a teacher to, you know, make sure that I get to the topics on paper 1 and practice them, and force students to do the same. So look, today's topic is composing. We're going to look at ways we can practice for this question. I'm going to suggest a few ideas to you, like 30-minute sessions where we can, instead of spending the 80 minutes that's required in the exam for this question, if we focus on it for 30 minutes study sessions, then that's a really good way to practice. Kind of, you get it planned and you get it started and the first few paragraphs done, and that's a clever way to study for this question. Okay, so look, let's that's my sort of introduction and sales pitch over, and let's get into the notes here, guys. We are on page 5 of the notes, right? And it says just some background to the question on page 5. I think I've got a bit of it here behind me on the board, right? Our topic is composing. We're saying it's 25% of the overall mark. Think about that. That branches over 3 different grade descriptors. You know, that's like, you know, that could be the difference between a H1 and a H4 if you don't do it properly. So it's very important. All right. The genres are here and they're also in your notes there. But what have you a choice of answering? These genres here on the board: short story, a descriptive essay, personal essay, an article, a speech or debate. And so there's one missing off the board, which is a discursive essay. I'll just throw that in down the bottom here. Discursive is the other option. I think they're in your notes anyway there, so you don't need to furiously take these down or anything. So a discursive essay as well is the 6th option, right? And generally, nearly always we have these options coming up. So look, we have to, start to practice these over the next year and a half on our Leaving Cert course. And by the time you get to the end of 6th year, what's the goal? The goal is that you sort of have a plan A and a plan B. Do you know what I mean? The goal is by the end of 6th year, you're kind of saying to yourself, well, I love writing short stories. I like writing fiction, characterization, setting, plotline, atmosphere, all that type of thing. It's brilliant. But if the short story on the exam doesn't come up the way I want it, and I don't like the way the question is phrased, my plan B is to write a personal essay, right? Which is, a more sort of non-fiction, personal, written by you about a particular topic. Or, your plan A might be the speech or the debate, which comes up every year. So I like to write the language of argument, the language of persuasion. I'm going to write a speech or a debate. But sometimes that comes up and it's quite tricky. The words mightn't suit you. There might be a word there that you don't understand. So you have a plan B, which is I'm going to write the article. There's always an article there. Sometimes there's two. Write an article for a newspaper or magazine or website or something like that. And they're both sort of non-fiction. So anyway, the genres are there. They're the different styles of writing. They all include, you remember our 5 language genres for paper 1? Argument, remember, a pain, argument, persuasion, aesthetic, information, narration. Well, these topics cover all those 5 language genres. Some you'll have 2, some you'll just have 1, but there are elements of those, all those. If you remember, we went through them when we did question A in that class, I think it was session 3. We went through the 5 language genres. They're all being tested in these styles of writing. Okay, so now it's your chance to use some of the features you learned about there. So maybe you're writing a short story and you're just writing a descriptive essay, and you're going to use some of those features. Same with speeches or articles. Okay, what else is there? Yeah, this question, you've got, you've got 80 marks. Excuse me, I knew there was a typo on the board, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. Apologies. We have 100 marks, for this question. 80 minutes, okay? So 100 marks equates to 25%. There are 400 marks going for Leaving Cert English. So this question is worth 25%. That is colossal. It's huge. It's more than Shakespeare or it's more poetry or anything like that. So we've 80 minutes. That's a long time, isn't it? You've got an hour and 20 minutes to write this answer. An hour and 20 minutes. It's a huge amount of time in one exam, right? To write a piece of creative writing. This necessarily isn't something that we study old school Leaving Cert rote learning, learning things off. It's not that type of question. This is a question where you need to practice the skills of creative writing, and then on the day you think on your feet and you come up with some sort of a composition, right? Composing. So 80 minutes, that's plan for 10 and write for 70. And I highly recommend, and we'll do one of these today, right, in class, that you plan for 10 minutes. Because sometimes students go straight into writing and then the essay stuffers, because halfway through they run out of ideas. So a plan is like your safety blanket, right? What are we aiming for? What's the overall goal? It's 4 to 6 pages. And I'm just going to put in brackets there, 4 to 6 paragraphed pages, right? Where we've got good sharp paragraphing all the way through. And 4 to 6, minimum for this question. Minimum really is 4, right? We want 4 good pages of writing. Obviously, I think once or twice I've given definitely H1 to 3.5 when it was just done perfectly. But if you think about it, if you've got 80 minutes for this answer, an examiner really wants to see a solid piece of writing. So, 3 pages is too little here. Generally all the time I voice on the side of quality, not quantity. But definitely for this question, 80 minutes. We want something solid. We want a solid piece of writing here. So yeah, length is sort of important in this question. So we're looking for 4 pages, right? Anything 4 on is fine. Some people have bigger handwriting. You might write 6. But don't give it any more than the 80 minutes, because you need all the, the time for the other questions. The other 90 minutes that you have is you need to put that to the other questions. Okay, so I think I've kind of covered page 4. We might just the first half of page 4. If we just go down to the general tips, right, and we just quickly read over these, right, the general tips, bottom of page 5 for composition. What are the general tips? Purpose. Remember, it's a question, right? We remember our marking scheme for English, PCLM. It's on page 4 of the notes if you want to have a look, or page 3 or 4, sorry, it's on page 4. So PCLM, and because this question is worth 100 marks, the percentages actually equate to the marks that you're given in the essay, right? So you've 30 marks for P, 30 marks for C, 30 for L, and 10 for mechanics. Purpose, coherence, language is L, right? Language and mechanics. Purpose, remember, that's what the first point is saying. Remember, just because it's creative writing, there is a purpose. Make sure you stick to what you're being asked to do. It'll be fairly straightforward, but just make sure you stick to it. Sometimes students think it's composition, it's creative writing, I can do whatever the hell I like. Sort of is true in lots of ways, but make sure you're guided by what the question is saying, and to follow it as well to the letter of the law in many ways. Bullet point 2, read the question several times. Just make sure you have it, and this is worth 100 marks, right? Bullet point 3, highlight the key words. Bullet point 4, plan for 10 minutes, write for 70, 4 to 6 pages. So I've said that. Check the theme of the paper. That will help you in your planning. Each composition is linked with the text. Speed read before planning. All that's saying is the composition, the idea for the composition, there'll be 7 different options, right? And that's something I didn't say. You will have a choice of 7 different essays. It's further up the page in the notes there, and you pick one. Okay, 7 options for composition, and you pick one. So make sure as it says there, each composition is linked with a text. If you find it helpful, you could go to that text to help you plan. Some students like that, others just leave that altogether, but I'm just mentioning it. ALPS for non-fiction. Okay, I'll come back to that later on, that idea of ALPS, what that means. Write within the genre specified. Example, personal essay or short story. Now that bullet point, that third last bullet point, means don't mix up your genres. And the only way you're going to do that is if you practice them, right? So sometimes students mix the short story and the personal essay up because they've never done them before, right? And if you haven't done them before, you're not going to do a good job of it. So sometimes short story is fiction, personal essay is non-fiction. Sometimes they get mixed up, and that can cause your grade, a lot of damage. So whatever the genre is that you're doing, make sure the essay sounds like that particular genre. And you'll only know that through practice. 2 more points there. Sharp paragraphing is essential, and proofread as you go. The end of a sentence is best practice for proofreading. So every time you finish a sentence, you should be checking to see that the what you've said, your language and mechanics is good. Remember, language and mechanics, right? 40% of your grade. 40 marks for language and mechanics in this essay. So if you don't proofread, how do you expect to get a good mark for language and mechanics? You won't. Okay, definitely not for mechanics, and language will definitely suffer too. So proofread. Every time you put a full stop on that paper for any question in English, especially this question here, but any question in English, you check the sentence stands up grammatically and makes sense. Okay.